Hey everybody, I just wanted to talk a little bit about expeditionary behavior as well as group dynamic, especially in outdoor adventure setting. Canoeing is really an interesting thing to teach because so many folks have had an experience in a canoe, and a lot of people would call themselves canoeists. So the idea that the art of canoeing is something that could be looked at as academic or challenging can be almost offensive to some people. In our society, um, opening oneself up to being able to absorb information is something that is really quite difficult. And something that, on a superficial level, our society really discourages. What I'm discussing here is kind of this back country versus a front country attitude. I think one of the reasons that I really enjoy the back country is because a lot of the superfluous and fake, quite frankly, fake behaviors that carry us through our daily lives don't work in the backcountry. So really quick, I'm not going to draw this out too far, but really quick, if we think about it, in the front country, the behaviors that allow us to have success often don't hold up in the backcountry. For that, I mean, for a big aspect or for a large portion of the population, the idea is how can I get the most while putting the least in? How can I make the most money for myself while doing the least amount of work? How can I read the cliff notes for the book so I can get an A on the test but not really read the book? How can I invest the least and yet get the biggest reward? We see that time and time and time again, and kind of ironically, I see it with students as well, in the sense of how can I check the box in the course requirement, or how can I check the box as far as the credits I need to graduate, but really not invest that much into it? How can I get the good grade but still be able to party and still be able to do these other things that require a lesser amount of investment? And while I understand that, and I'm not altogether exonerated from that myself, I think what needs to really come into focus is that within our lives, the things that are really memorable, the things that allow us to grow, come with great sacrifice and struggle, failures, and hopefully triumph in the end. So I think the backcountry exposes that behavior very quickly, and it just doesn't fly there. I look at a lot of folks that are involved in different experiences or learning, and for so long they have kind of tried to cheat the experience that they never actually self-actualize to a point where they're able to absorb information and then synthesize that information in order to make their own lives and hopefully the rest of their world a better place. So in the backcountry, things like patience is rewarded. Things like humility is rewarded. Things like kindness is rewarded. Things like knowing one's limits is rewarded. Things like pushing one's limits is rewarded. Whereas in the front country, the idea is, again, how do I play it safe to look and to put on a personification that I am, some kind of great person, but when the rubber meets the road, we maybe never get tested. In the backcountry, you will be tested. And that becomes even more difficult when you are with an entire group. So normally when you are in a canoe tripping experience, you are within a group, and that group dynamic can be really, really tricky. So in that sense, what we're looking at is kind of superficial fun versus what I'll call deep fun. All around us, we're presented with opportunities for superficial fun. Things that we can do in the moment that don't require a large investment and give us a shot of dopamine that makes us feel happy and in the moment. And there's certainly a place for that in life. However, deep fun is a little different. Deep fun requires investment. It requires struggle. It could require pain, failure, exposure, embarrassment, all these different things that many aspects of society have taught us to avoid. But that deep fun, those are the experiences that you're going to remember and that you're going to grow from. Superficial fun is like a roller coaster ride. You may remember it for a little while. It was fun, it was cool, but you didn't really invest a lot. You just kind of paid admission, and that was it. Deep fun, you had to plan, you had to deal with bad weather, you had to deal with hunger, you had to deal with wrecked equipment, you had to make larger financial sacrifices, and though you had to creatively find your way around obstacles that you didn't know existed. So it's that deep fun that we're going for, and I think that people have a harder time actualizing that today. Actually, I know they do, because this is what I do for work. I've seen so many crazy things on canoe trips. I have seen people forget sleeping bags. I've seen people literally play with fire and burn holes in valuable gear. I've seen people forget food at a campsite. Now they're 20 miles down the river and food's up at a campsite, and there's a whole bunch of people that are hungry and cranky. I've seen people skip corners on a portage and drop gear in the water, destroying and losing the gear. I have seen canoes wrap around rocks because people are so tired or unable to speak up. So many different awesome experiences, and really that's all a part of being on a canoe trip. The idea is that you've got to be prepared emotionally, physically, and pragmatic as you possibly can be. Mother Nature, the river, the lake, is going to throw you curveballs. And if you're not ready to accept those curveballs because you've put up your own obstacles all the way through by not investing, by not taking a situation seriously, by not wanting to look vulnerable, not wanting to humble yourself, not wanting to speak up, then you are now putting yourself at risk as well as your entire group. I had a great experience with this on the boat trip in Maine with my son, my brother, and his son, and we had a wonderful trip. The boat trip is about, well, we did about 60, closer to 80 miles on the trip, and we were just talking about on that first night, like just expedition behavior and being really careful with equipment, not throwing our axe into the ground. Not throwing rocks in the general direction where people are at, or watching where our hooks are on our fishing lines, things like that. And one of my son's dry bags was smashed because some of the other boys were just aimlessly throwing these rocks, and they actually broke the buckle on his dry bag. And so for the rest of the trip, the poor kid had a wet bag. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So it's not that we're looking to have such order and stringency that things are just feel stifling with overpower, but it's that we adopt a attitude of humility and grace that allows us to be introspective, to learn about ourselves so we can express who we are to the rest of our group, so that we can communicate the best way, and so that basically everybody finds themselves on the same trajectory. And that's what I call a collective objective. So the collective objective is that everybody has the exact same goal in mind. So if one person's goal is to paddle all rapids and another person's goal is to sit on the shore and paint watercolors, you've got a problem right out of the gate. Everybody has to have the same goal in mind. What is the purpose for the trip? Is the purpose to do a marathon and to paddle 60 miles a day? Or is the purpose to relax, have fun at camp, make good food, whatever? So having that collective objective is absolutely imperative. From there, it's a eye on safety or risk management. In today's society, there is a safety net all over. You can really screw up and still be safe. Yeah, but when you're 70, 80 miles out in the backcountry and you're not looking at where your hooks are for your lure, and you throw a backcast and you catch somebody in the eye, that's a very serious issue. Or when you're not being careful and you decide to run a rapid that you can't handle and you fold a boat and you're stranded, that's a totally different story. So it's an eye on safety. My dad, who was in the Special Forces, will often say that, somebody that is, he was a Green Beret, they have the ability to scale a face, but if they can walk around that cliff face, they're going to walk around that cliff face. So it's not being afraid to back off an initiative because it's better for that collective objective in the end. It's not time to push the extremes of what you've ever done on an expedition, because the expedition as a whole is already doing that. You've trained to put yourself in that position. And then lastly, it's a growth mindset. So the growth mindset is, how do I open myself up so that I can get the most out of this deep experience? That's really hard for people to do, especially when they believe that, canoeing is really, it's no big deal. I've done it for my whole life. No, how do you open up to being able to absorb not only more information, but nature and the people around you? And I have a whole matrix in which I have kind of spelled out. But in the end, I think that the growth mindset comes from something that we don't really celebrate in the front country, and that is humility. So humility is the admission that we don't know everything, the admission that that we have a desire to know ourselves better and to know the people around us better. And it then liberates you to ask questions that are thoughtful and that beg for the answers that you need to be successful. So growth mindset requires that humility of, how can I totally invest in a way that's going to get me a substantive return. And if it's all just about goofing around with your buddies, that's not going to happen. If it's all about just getting a grade so I get the credit so I can, just check this on the list, that's not going to happen. Humility is really about surrendering yourself to knowing who you are, admitting your weaknesses, being vulnerable, asking for clarifying points, asking for areas that maybe you would be weak in, opens you up to the ability of helping other people, and so that everybody's all in the same boat. So ultimately, though, if we adopt humility and we recognize that humility is going to allow us to learn or to gain knowledge, I have to tell you that, in my mind, the ultimate objective of the human condition has got to be freedom. And certainly when you're on a wilderness canoe trip, freedom abounds. Freedom, in my mind, is options. And knowing yourself enough to be able to synthesize and then choose the right option for you, given whatever circumstance you're in. I think all too often people are just kind of guessing, or they're reliant on someone else to make those choices for them, and that is not freedom. So the ability to have options comes from having a pool of experiences, understanding of concepts, understanding of different approaches that allow for you to create your own trajectory or forge your own path to freedom. So again, freedom is a culmination of experiences and choices of knowledge that you were humble enough to open yourself up to. And that's what I ask you to do as we move forward in this class. This is a really powerful lesson and one I'm very proud of. And hopefully it's one that rings true to you. I am going to ask you to give me a little synopsis of this. So similar to humility equaling knowledge, and knowledge equaling freedom, if we adopt this collective objective with an eye on safety and a growth mindset, I've got to tell you that the reality of that equation is a deep experience, thus fun. And I don't know about you, but I love having fun. Thank you.